back over to Donovan.
Thanks. I'm gonna try to make this shorter. It's not gonna take the entire hour because the jet lag is kicking my ass right now, and I am struggling. But I want to show you this, right? So the adrenaline's gonna start pumping here in a minute, and I'm gonna wake up. But I don't intend this to take the entire hour, so we can get to the Q&A sooner, and then we can get you guys out of here. So thanks for sticking in there with me. Skip this. Yep, same thing. Skip that. Right? We're already making great progress now because you've already seen that slide twice. So here what we're going to do is really quickly show you again some of the services. Now we showed you the 5 services, but those 5 services actually provide a lot of functionality. If you were to break it out, you can do all of this stuff with the 5 services that I showed you just a moment ago. Your source control, agile planning, test case management, build automation, continuous deployment, release management. Like there's so much that's packed in to those 5 services that you can actually do. And what's really cool is that this isn't the limit. This talk is all about integration and extensibility of the platform itself. Because I don't think of them as services, I think of them as a platform. It is just there to allow you to do literally whatever you want. I was talking to some of the people in the break. That pipeline I showed you just keeps getting bigger and bigger because I figure out more and more stuff that I can automate. Right? It's like once you get to the point where you're like, man, I'm bored. I've automated everything except this. Oh, now I can go automate this one thing that I hadn't automated yet, right? Because now everything else has been automated for me. And what you want to manage when you're thinking about DevOps is you want to manage the entire freaking stack. And if you look at the stack, it looks something like this, right? The very first thing that you do is you have an idea, right? I have some idea that I want to turn into a working piece of software. And where are you going to do that? You're going to do that inside of Azure DevOps. This is where you're going to use Azure boards. You're going to create that initial product backlog. You're going to start grooming that backlog. And you're going to start adding all those manual test cases I talked about a minute ago. Then what you want to start doing is thinking about your infrastructure. This is where you're going to want to use infrastructure as code. You can use Terraform, Ansible, Chef, Azure CLI, whatever you want. But infrastructure as code is the idea of taking the desired environment and codifying it such that you can store it in source control and act upon it in your pipeline. You should never have to go to the Azure portal to do anything with your infrastructure. If you do, figure out a way to automate that step. Right? I want to be able to, and in a brave world, I actually have 2 subscriptions. I have one subscription I flush all the time. I literally write a command, and I just tweeted it the other day how to delete all your resource groups in parallel in a background process in PowerShell. It's like one line, it's awesome, right? You just go ahead and start a new job that will go ahead and wax all of my freaking resource groups, and I go off and get my console back, and about 10 minutes later, my entire subscription is empty. If you do not have the confidence to do that, to re-stand up your provisioning, your profile, or your infrastructure, you're not doing infrastructure as code correctly. You should be that brave. And also think about what that does for disaster recovery. Everyone in here is just sick to their stomach thinking about a disaster happens. Me, I just push a button, right? And the entire environment is back up in a matter of like 10 minutes from a complete total disaster, right? So that's what you want to be thinking about with infrastructure as code. Now, provisioning your infrastructure is just half the battle. Just because I figured out how to use Terraform to spin up a VM doesn't mean that that VM is ready to host my application. Does it have IIS installed? Does it have the .NET Framework installed? Does it have port 80 open on the firewall? That's where configuration comes in. I'm very anal about infrastructure as code and configuration as code. In my mind, are 2 drastically different disciplines. A lot of the industry now are kind of merging them all into IAC, but they're not. Infrastructure as code is the provisioning of the environment. And then configuration as code is the configuration of that environment now that it's been hydrated for me. Another reason that I'm very anal about that is that you can do configuration as code against a physical device. You understand the difference there? I can give DSC to a physical server and say, go make yourself a web server. But I can't just magically make a physical machine show up using infrastructure as code, so they're different. Infrastructure as code, very tied to the provisioning, is very tied to the cloud. Configuration as code can be done anywhere, so that's why I distinguish between them. Now you got to start doing your app installation, right? Some people are going to use WAR files, some people are going to use NuGet packages, some people are going to use zip files. Now we're doing Docker images, all sorts of things, right? And it doesn't matter how you want to install your application because we're just a task runner. You tell us the task to do, we'll go run that task for you and deploy your app. But just like infrastructure, your applications sometimes also have configuration that needs to change. And we were just talking about that a moment ago. How do you change your app from dev to QA to prod? Especially when you're dealing with a mobile application that has been compiled, everything was hard-coded, and it's been signed, and there is no changing that IPA again. How is it supposed to move from the dev backend to the QA backend to the production backend, right? Well, there's ways of doing that, and that's I'm not going to spoil it yet, but if you watch the VS Live video, I'm going to do a keynote at the end of the month at VS Live. I'm going to explain exactly how to do all that stuff, right? And that's where the burst server comes in. So you're probably going to hear a lot of stuff about burst servers after I get off stage, because I just made that word up, so you're not going to hear anything about it yet. But as soon as I get off stage, everyone will know what a burst server is and why they exist. But that's going to help you take your mobile applications and start treating them like every other application you've ever done. Then obviously it's time for testing. Hardest part is getting good test data, right? That's the hardest part, especially when you're doing integration testing, automated UI testing. You have to have a known good database snapshot of the data. What's really cool is that people aren't aware. How many of you use SQL Server? How many of you, with your hands up, know what SSDT stands for? A few of you, okay. It's never everyone who had their hands up. So SSDT stands for SQL Server Data Tools. It is Microsoft's best kept secret. Right? We give it to you for free, have been since 2008, and nobody knows about it. Well, luckily, this is actually more hands than normal that know about it. It allows you to treat your database like every other portion of your application. You can version your schema, and you can act upon it in your DevOps pipeline using SSDT. Now, that's a DAC pack with a D. If you go ahead and change that to a backpack with a B, that now has data in it as well. Not only the schema changes, but data that you can use for all of your integration testing or your automated UI testing. It gets even better now that we have Docker. When one of my friends, he like blew my mind with this, and it's like, what's the coolest use case for Docker? He says, sample data. I'm like, what are you talking about? He says, we actually have a Docker image running SQL Server that has all of the test data that we want in it. And we don't even have to clean it up after our integration test run. We just start another container. Like, holy, how have I not thought of that? That's freaking brilliant, right? He's like, yeah, Donovan, it's this perfect image of all of our test data at a known good state. We run all of our unit tests against it. We destroy the freaking image, and when we want another one, we just hydrate another image, run our test again, and it's beautiful, right? And SQL Server now runs on Linux, and we have container images for it, so you can actually do that as well. So getting good test data has always been a challenge. Backpack is an answer, and Docker is a fantastic answer. If you want to spend money, you can go to one of our really good partners, Redgate. They have this thing called SQL Clone. It's freaking ridiculous, right? It literally will, in seconds, faster than even a Docker image, spin up an entire database for you with new data, and it uses this thing called a differencing disk to where the core data is never actually touched, even when you're running a test against it. It's brilliant. So if you want to go do that, that's also a cool option as well. Then you got to go run your automated tests. Coded UI is dead. I need to update this slide. We're not adding any new functionality to it, but it's still great for fat client stuff until we write our Selenium driver for Windows, which is coming, right? So Selenium, go invest there, right? That would be my advice to you. We're backing Selenium at Microsoft. We're writing drivers for Windows and drivers for all of our browsers. So Selenium has basically won the battle there, in my opinion. We also have load and performance tests. Do not, again, this is me being completely transparent, do not invest in our load testing anymore. I loved our web testing framework. It is being deprecated. Now everyone is going off to, what is that one? Selenium. No, for load testing. What the hell is the other one? It's open source, it's free, Apache JMeter. Yeah, JMeter. Yeah, so JMeter is the one that everyone at Microsoft is telling our people to use for load testing. So just to be transparent. And then you can use our test plans for all your manual testing. So again, we're managing the entire stack and we're just going up. Now it's time for approvals, which is kind of cool. And a lot of people, I was talking to some banks earlier today, because I come and visit a lot of customers here, and they're always worried about security and compliance and SOX compliance and things like that. And it's really cool because one of the features that we have in our pipeline is the person who starts the release cannot be the person who approves the release into production. Right? It's kind of a cool, it seems insignificant, right? But it stops people from siphoning millions and millions of dollars with a rounding error, right? Because there was this really clever person who realized that banks round numbers, and that the cents and that roll off don't go anywhere. So he just had him go into his account instead, right? And so he didn't feel like he was stealing because the money was just being lost. The guy's a millionaire. He's in jail. The money will be there when he gets out, but it's pretty smart, right? But we could have caught that if we had the feature that I'll talk about when we get in there. But release management allows you to have individuals, and what's even cooler is that we now have something called release gates, which I'm going to demo for you, that allow the approval of your pipeline to happen from a third-party system. Right, so let's say, for example, you're using ServiceNow as your change management. Historically, what you would do is you'd have to pause this, go over to ServiceNow, do all this magic, and then when that's done, send an email saying it's okay for the pipeline to continue, and then someone would go over to the pipeline and finally push the button and start your pipeline back up. But what if our pipeline could simply talk to ServiceNow? And then you would get rid of so much of that inner communication, and the pipelines would just work. Matter of fact, we have that working, and that's the demo I'm going to show you here in just a second. And then I've been telling you this all day long. Monitor and learn. You have to monitor. You have to learn. What's really cool is that you have to manage this entire stack. You can choose other vendors if you want to, but everything I just showed you comes from Microsoft. If you bet with Microsoft, we can literally help you manage your entire stack from beginning to end for any language targeting any platform. If you want to do Java, I didn't say anything about .NET on this slide. I didn't say anything about Java or Node.js. Everything I just said is required no matter what language you program in or what platform you target, and Microsoft can help you with all of it. If you want to use Dynatrace, who's a great partner of ours, or New Relic, or whatever monitoring, fine, and you can still use the rest of it from us. If you want to use Octopus Deploy instead of us, fine. Like we said the last time, we will mix and match as much as you want, but this is what you should be looking at. How in the world do we manage all of this, and who can help us? And the only vendor who can help you in every one of those is us, and we're more than happy to do so. So normally, this is the ecosystem you're talking about, right? You have the development phase, the build and test phase, the deploy, and the monitor and learn phase. And obviously, Microsoft fits everything. I would love for this to be your ecosystem. But when I visit customers, our ecosystems look more like this. You know what's really cool about this slide? All this works with us too. I simply do not care if you want to use these tools. I can still plug in at any point that you want because we have service endpoints, we have REST APIs, we have service hooks, we have everything that we need to with standard APIs to talk to most of these. And in our marketplace, you're going to find most of these names, right? Because we already have done the heavy lifting for you so that you can just plug them right into your pipeline. So service hooks. Service hooks are allowing us to be able to communicate with other pieces of software. For example, you want every check-in to be inside of your Slack channel or inside of your team room so that you can have a discussion over it. Every time a work item is created or a bug is created, you want that to show up inside of Slack or Teams or Trello or Boards. That's what service hooks are available for, and we have service hooks to all these other different types of systems. So we can send out or syndicate that information for you to all the other places that your teams want to work so they don't have to come to us or be forced to use a UI that they're not familiar with. We were able to send the data out, and then we're able to also aggregate that data for those who love Azure DevOps and the UI. They don't have to go to these other systems either. The systems are going to talk to each other thanks to our service hooks. Another way is our REST API. This is my favorite, right? Yo Team, the VS Team PowerShell module, all the cool stuff I'm doing in my pipelines is all because of this. Right? Almost everything that you can do from the UI, and I say almost because not all the APIs are published yet, but all you need there is to take Fiddler, fire it up, and it's published as far as I'm concerned, right? If I know how to make the REST API call, I'm calling it. And VS Team has made this extremely, extremely easy. You don't even have to understand the API anymore. There's a PowerShell module that you can install that just lets you do this, okay? I also have several blog posts on how to call our REST API from Node.js and PowerShell. So if you do want to write something extremely custom or specific to yourself, I teach you how to use our REST API, okay? To me, it's hands down the most powerful thing that we've done is expose this to the world because I've automated all sorts of silly stuff inside of our REST API. Extensions are fantastic. You can write your own, but you probably don't have to because as you can see, some big names like AWS, Bamboo are already in our marketplace. I just love the fact that AWS has a extension inside of our marketplace because so many of our customers have a multi-cloud initiative. They don't want to be tied into one platform or one cloud for whatever reason, and now they can still use a single tool set to get to AWS and Azure, which is the two clouds that most people are going to. We do have some people using GCP, especially if they're doing a lot of AI. Again, they don't have an extension, but they have a CLI, which means I can now expose their entire cloud to Azure DevOps as well. You can write these yourself, they're actually quite easy to write. And once you write them, you can actually publish them publicly like this and make a name for yourself, or you can keep them private just for your organization, right? Because one of the guys I'm trying to hire right now, one of the reasons I'm trying to hire him, he has one of the most popular extensions in this marketplace. Because it proves to me that he knows what he's talking about, he knows what he's doing, and he knows how to exploit our system really well. And I want to hire Colin as fast as I can. So he has a really cool extension in this marketplace. Service endpoints, this is how you can actually connect to things like your GitHub repositories, your Jenkins build. Back when we used to have Hockey App or App Center is what we're going to be using now, Chef. These are ways that they can actually, again, service endpoints are one way where we can actually authenticate against a system that is closed and be able to get that information that we need versus the service hooks, which are kind of like the other way. This brings the data in. The other one lets us send the data out. Okay? We also have web hooks that you can actually tie into. I was telling a story over the break. You heard Martin talk about objectives and key results. He just called them OKRs. A lot of people are starting to switch to OKRs as a way of managing their work and planning their vision and missions. What's interesting is that I got really excited because I was sitting down with Aaron Bjork, and we were doing an interview, and he started telling me all about these OKRs. And I got excited. I read some books. So I read Measure What Matters and the other OKR book, which I don't really like Measure What Matters. The other OKR book is better, actually, like much better. So I got all excited, and I was like, man, I want to use these inside of Azure DevOps. So Azure Boards is customizable, which is another extension point that I don't even have on one of these slides, but I'll tell you this quick anecdote. So I went in and I took the Agile process, and I created a derivative of it. And from there, I can start customizing it. And I added an objective and a key result work item type to that particular process. Now, what you'll learn as you start investigating objectives and key results is that you grade them both. You grade them between 0 and 1. So as you start to achieve your key results, after you're done, you grade it between 0 and 1. And your objective to which those key results are linked is the average of the grades of all the key results linked to that objective. Well, I didn't want my engineers wasting time trying to do the aggregate of all their key results to grade their objective. So what I did is I registered a webhook. And what I did is I wrote an Azure function, which is cool because Azure functions is what you get 1 million executions a month for free. They only get paid when they're running. And I wrote an Azure function that is a webhook listening from Azure Boards. And every time a key result changed, it let me know. And then I was able to use the REST API in my webhook to go find all of the siblings of that key result, average all their grades, find the parent of that key result, which is an objective, and then set the average grade for that objective. So my users just do their key results. The objectives grade themselves, and it's all because I was able to use the extension points inside of Azure DevOps, and the team doesn't even know that that wasn't a feature already. It's such a natural way of using the product and leveraging the extensibility points that they just thought that stuff always worked that way, not realizing that I'd written a function to do it, right? So I'll be open sourcing that here shortly as well, which is really cool. But the extension points are unbelievable. If you can dream it, chances are you could probably do it with this system. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you a cool demo in just a second. Now, you've heard me say multiple times, if you can do it from a command line, you can do it from our system. This is why. Right? There's a little section called utility. It is the most powerful set of tasks in the entire freaking box. What was really cool about this one, this is obviously the Windows command prompt, right? Wrong. That is not the Windows command prompt. And I found out by accident, because when I saw that, I was like, yep, command line, that's Windows command prompt. It'll run batch scripts for me. And this was when .NET Core was still in alpha, which means it was on none of our hosted build agents. If you wanted to do this, you had to do it on a private build agent. So what I did is I created a private build agent, installed the alpha bits of .NET Core. I used 3 of these commands, and I said .NET restore, .NET build, .NET publish. It worked great on a Windows machine. And then I thought, oh, I want to try this on a Linux machine, but damn it, I don't want to learn Bash and have to use the stupid Bash one and all that kind of stuff. I just want to use this other one. So what I did is I switched it to Linux machine, but I forgot to change it to Bash, and I clicked run. This runs on Mac, Windows, or Linux, any command you tell it. It just worked. So here I am using this command 3 times on Mac, Windows, and Linux, and it worked every single time because this is not the Windows command prompt. I cannot stress that enough. This is just an arbitrary command runner which will run happily on Mac, Windows, or Linux. So if it runs from a command line and it lives on all 3 platforms, use this one. Now, another one that you can use, which a lot of people do not realize, is this one. How many of you know that PowerShell is open source and cross-platform? Works on Mac, Windows, and Linux. Do you know how happy I get when I type dir on a Mac and it happened and it works? I freaking giggle my ass off every time. Like, how cool is that? I can dir on a freaking Mac now, right? And it was so weird to me is I type ls on Windows more often now, which is kind of bizarre, right? I don't know why my brain's got warped that way. But I love PowerShell. I love the fact that it runs on Mac, Windows, and Linux. And our PowerShell task, the one that's in the box, actually is smart enough to know if it's running on Linux or Mac and runs PowerShell core for you. And if it's running on Windows, you can choose between 5.1 or 6.0, whatever you want by just checking a box, right? So this one or this one gets you everywhere. The rest of these, like this one here, only works on Windows. This one here only works on Mac and Linux. So I would pick from the top level there. It's amazing that you can actually write stuff once and never have to write it again. So this is the demo I am about to show you. It's Inside Microsoft, it's called the Gopi demo because the first time I saw it, Gopi, one of our employees, showed it to me, and I lost my mind. I'm like, dude, this is freaking awesome. And I just stole his environment, and I've been doing his demo ever since. But I give him credit. We call it the Gopi demo, which is not really fair because Gopi didn't create it. Gopi just let me use it, but I think someone else created it. I'll have to find out their name. But check this out. We have a Java application, right, that's going to be running on Linux. Built, the source code is inside a GitHub Enterprise. It builds inside of Jenkins. The artifacts from Jenkins gets published into Artifactory. Okay? Then all of a sudden, we get woken up here inside of Azure Pipelines, which then makes associations with work items inside of Jira, uses ServiceNow to get an approval, deploys with Ansible into AWS and into Azure via Tomcat. Right? Who could imagine that you would be able to do that with Microsoft on my chest? Right? This is something that we would never ever do before, but I'm about to do this exact demo right now. And it gets even better because when I'm done with this demo, I will take you to the status of this release and be able to take you to every other point of this particular picture. Deep link into GitHub Enterprise, deep link into Azure, into Jira, deep link into the results of my Jenkins build. Literally, we give you full traceability across all these disparate systems in one pipeline, simply by using this one feature. Right? Now what I hope you're going to do is you're like, man, this is amazing. This product sucks. Now that we have this in there, let's replace this one with boards. Right? And then you're going to be like, man, this is really cool, but this sucks. Let's replace this with something else from Microsoft. So that's what I'm hoping happens. Right? It just spreads like a virus. Right? We just get this guy in the middle, and the next thing you know, it's just going to spread everywhere. Because you could replace that with artifacts. You could replace that with pipelines. You can leave that GitHub Enterprise because we already own that one. Replace this with boards. ServiceNow we'd have to leave in there because we don't have an answer for ServiceNow. We definitely have an answer for Ansible. And then get that AWS out of there. And then all of a sudden, we slowly have made this an entire Microsoft demo. But we're not going to do that today. Today, we're going to literally do this demo, which is one of my favorites to do lately. So I think that's the last thing. Yep, time for demo. So what we're going to do real quick is let's just go take a look at the app itself. One of the things that's very important to realize is that if we were to go ahead and zoom in on this app here, that is AWS. Clear as day. This is Azure. Right? So I basically have two VMs in two different clouds running the exact same app, and I'm now going to attempt to deploy to both of those apps and change both of these, the contents of these web pages across two different clouds, which is what a lot of our customers are dying to do. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and make an arbitrary change. I don't need this file open. Right now it says Cambridge everywhere, and what we're going to do is we're going to try to change that from Cambridge to, let's just do like London Reactor. All right, so there's 4 instances of that. I'm going to go ahead and change that everywhere. So it's going to be a very simple change. I'm going to come over here, and remember I said I wanted to link this to the things that are happening inside of Jira. And all we have to do is a special hashtag. I'll make sure it looks pretty good so you can see that. So this is the comment I'm going to use. KOD-11 and KOD-12 actually identified 2 different work items inside of the Jira system. And all I'm saying is I'm updating the institute, which is a change that I'm currently making. Now this change is being made on my machine, but it's going to be pushed to GitHub Enterprise. So I'm going to go ahead and check these changes in. And then finally, I'm going to go ahead and push these changes to my Git repository. Once that line stops, what we should be able to do is if I hop over here and go to Jenkins, and I zoom in a little bit down here at the bottom, hopefully what's going to happen is we're going to get another build. Perfect. Right? So this build is being triggered in Jenkins from a commit to GitHub Enterprise. So Microsoft hasn't even really been involved besides using Visual Studio Code at this point. So if you've already made it, and I tell people this all the time, if you've already made an investment in Jenkins, leverage that investment, right? Because setting up Jenkins was not easy. You might not remember how hard it was, but it was hard. And you've just forgotten because it's been working for years, so you love Jenkins. But if you had to install it again, you'd hate it just like I do, okay? Now, Jenkins took over the world because our build system only did one thing well, but what I would encourage you to do is to reevaluate Jenkins with everyone else in the system right now because I would put our build system up against Jenkins any day. Right? I really do think we have a superior product, but I also know that our customers are already invested in this product and we want to make this the best experience for them as possible. So what we can do now, and this is going to start to get cool here, I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and when I do, you'll notice that I now understand that I was working inside of Jira, and I have links to it right here from inside of Jenkins. What's even cooler is I now have a deep link right here inside of Azure DevOps as well. So this has actually triggered a release. This is where pipelines finally gets involved, right? This build sent stuff out to Artifactory and then notified release management that, hey, I have some stuff in here that I'd like you to go take a look at. I'm just going to go ahead and use this link right here from inside of Jenkins to actually navigate away from Jenkins and actually inside of our Azure pipelines here. So let me zoom back out here real quick. Now what we're going to do is we're going to see that there is a pipeline, and that pipeline is waiting for me to give it an approval. Once I give it an approval, we're going to then go ahead and deploy into AWS. Then afterwards, we're going to have to talk to ServiceNow before we can get it into production, which is actually our Azure environment. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and approve this. And what you're going to see on the right-hand side here is that we have several different approvers that have been set up, me as being one of them. And I'll talk through this as the pipeline is running on how we set this up, some of the options that you have when it comes to approvers, and why there's so many names there, and if they could be groups and things like that. So what I'm going to do is say we're going to go ahead and do London Reactor. Let's just go ahead and change that to demo for at London Reactor, and I'm going to go ahead and approve this. Now that I've approved this, this is actually going to go off and start building that particular pipeline for us. And while this is running, I'm going to go ahead and show you how this stuff was actually built. So what we're looking at now is the actual anatomy of that particular pipeline. As you can see, we have artifacts over here, and that is a Jenkins logo. The reason why is because there's several different artifacts that you can actually use to trigger your build. So this collection of icons that you see on the right-hand side of the screen lets me know that I can just have a build be the trigger. I can trigger out of Azure repos, GitHub, TFVC. For those who don't know what that means, that is Team Foundation Server Version Control. It's a centralized version control still supported by Azure DevOps. So if you're not ready for Git and you don't know what the hell a clone and a rebase is and you want to stick with Git latest, then you can stay with TFVC. If you want to make the transition to Git, we're ready for that as well. Artifactory, obviously, where some of our artifacts are being stored here. Our version of Artifactory, which is Azure Artifacts, Azure Container Registry, and Docker Hub. So every time you push a new version of your image, you could have one of these releases triggered to go off and start deploying that image for you inside your AKS cluster or wherever your infrastructure might be. And then clearly Jenkins is another artifact source that can be used to trigger your particular release. And what's interesting here is this list keeps getting bigger and bigger. Those were not always in there, right? So we're still trying to find ways that we can invest. Someone asked for me, and I'm going to get this on a recording here, and I want them to tweet at me anyway, when am I going to have universal packages be a target for me in here, right? And we might be able to get around that because I know the person who owns Azure Artifacts, and we'll have to make sure and see if we can actually get that in there for you, or if not, maybe you could use the Azure Artifacts as a trigger already. But I'll get you an answer for that for sure. So now if we were to go back here and see if we've made any progress, what we're going to notice is that we've already successfully deployed into AWS. I'm not done showing you how it's built, but I want to kind of parallelize this stuff. What you're going to notice now is this thing over here is ticking away. And what it's saying is that, Donovan, we need to get an approval from ServiceNow. The only way that I'm going to let this code enter into your next environment is that ServiceNow says it's okay to do so. I've already checked, and you have 5 minutes to get over there and do the right thing. And I'll check every 5 minutes for the next 24 hours. So as long as it happens within the next 24 hours, this will go ahead and succeed. But I want to do it here in the next 5 minutes so we don't have to wait for it. What I also want to prove to you is that here we are again on our AWS. If I refresh this, Cambridge should now say London Reactor. So I've now successfully deployed into one of my environments, which is inside of AWS, just like I would if it was any other environment. Now what I need to be able to do is come over here to our ServiceNow. And when I log in here, what I'm going to notice in the back end here is when I refresh this, instead of saying implement there, I'm going to have a brand new record that I now have to go back in and set up. So the very top item here should say new. And it does. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually take this 67 here, and I'm going to go ahead and try to process this through so that I get the happy implemented stage, which is what I need for the other side. I'm not going to go into the details of ServiceNow. If you're using it, you know the process I'm going through now is I'm basically trying to make sure that I get the approvals that I need in place so that I can get this through the process. So you have a change control process in ServiceNow, and instead of you having to tell release management when you've done this, this is automatically going to get done for me, right? So if I've done through all the gymnastics I need to, if I go back to this page here, that top item should be in the state of implement. Perfect. So this is the signal to release management that had to occur within the next 5 minutes to let release management know it's safe to go into the Azure environment. While it's doing that, because I'm sure I still have some minutes left, 4 minutes, I'm going to go back in and show you the release definition again. So I'm going to go back here to our release. and then we'll come back and we'll check on that later. Because there's some other things I want to show you here inside of our pipeline. So it's going to be off and running here. And if we were to go look at the task, we're ready for you. If you're ready for containers, we're ready for containers as well. Helm is becoming the de facto way of deploying into your AKS clusters, regardless. I shouldn't say AKS clusters, your Kubernetes clusters, because they do not have to be inside of Azure. They could be inside of AWS or GCP, wherever you want to. So what we're doing here is we're basically installing Helm, the client tools, onto the agent that is running this particular command. We're then going to go ahead and call Helm init into your cluster to make sure that Tiller is running and ready to actually do its job. And then we're basically running a Helm upgrade against an actual chart that we stored as an artifact from our build, right? So the chart has actually been published automatically. So this is going to upgrade our Kubernetes cluster, K8s, to the proper version of our application. Then down here, what we're going to be doing, because there's a back end to the front end that's running inside of the actual container, inside of the VM. We're downloading that artifact from Artifactory that was put there by Jenkins, and then we're basically using a deploy task into AWS that's actually leveraging Tomcat. Okay? Now, you notice on the first slide I had Ansible, and you're going to see Ansible being used in the next environment. So if I were to switch over to production, you're seeing something here that is only for demo. I would never deploy into one environment differently than I deployed into the last, okay? I don't want that lost on you that Donovan's doing something stupid. That's an anti-pattern. It is an anti-pattern. I'm doing it because I want to just show you as many tools as I possibly can, and that if you're comfortable with Ansible, I would have done Ansible in both environments, or I would use the same task in both environments. You do not want to switch what you're doing here. Not doing the init here is not actually changing it. I could do the init here. It's harmless to re-init your cluster, but I know it's already been initted the first time. So all I'm doing now is installing the client tools again on my agent, because it could be a different agent, and most likely will be a different agent if I'm using hosted. And then I'm running an upgrade of that chart to potentially another cluster or another namespace inside of that same exact cluster. And then here I'm downloading the exact same artifact from Artifactory, and then I'm going to be deploying it into Azure using a different mechanism just to prove a point. Now, another thing I want to show you real quick is that there's lots and lots of tasks that you can use. I've talked about these tasks a little bit in the past. You can see how small this little scroll bar is. There are literally hundreds of tasks in this task library. And mine keeps getting larger because I install stuff like the AWS, right? So here are the AWS tasks you get if you were to install the AWS extension. All the tasks I've rewritten from Microsoft are in open source, and you can actually go see them, learn how we wrote them, and write your own. Or you can actually send us a pull request, and we will go back in and pull your pull request right into the box, and your commands will be here as well. If you do not see what you need in this ridiculously long list of tasks that come out of the box, what I would encourage you to do is come over here and go to our marketplace. Going to our marketplace will actually show you all of the different extensions that have been made available to our customers from our partners. And what you can do is search for stuff like security, which is always top priority for a lot of people in the world. As you can see, there's tons of different security packages that you can download. I'm a big fan of Aqua. Aqua allows you to actually scan the layers of your image to make sure that none of your image layers of your containers actually have vulnerabilities in it. Another one that I'm a huge fan of, which I don't see on here right now, is White Source. White Source Bolt, we actually use it in our own pipeline, right? And what that does is it scans all of your packages that you depend upon, references a database to see if there's any known vulnerabilities against those packages, and even gets you remediation steps on, hey, all you have to do is upgrade to this particular version, that thing has been fixed, or you need to abandon that and actually replace it with this package instead because this package has been deprecated or has no plans of fixing that particular item. Black Duck is in here, White Source is in here, Twistlock, Aqua, there's just so much. There's White Source right there. They're a fantastic partner of ours. So we do a lot of stuff when it comes to security. The other thing that a lot of people are struggling with right now, and the DevOps report says it's high time that you start working on it, is making sure that your database is part of your DevOps pipeline, right? So if you read the latest report, you're going to see that this is where people are. I always view DevOps as a maturity model, right? At time zero, most people are just deploying their front end. They got their they got their front end web app deploying in their DevOps pipeline, but their database is this dirty little secret. They assume that it doesn't need to be in the pipeline because it doesn't change very often, and it's very risky, and our database is so unique. You've never seen anything like this before. It's huge. Is that how he says it? Huge? Idiot. So what we do then is that they don't believe that there's tools available to them that can actually help them deploy their databases, but there are, and they're actually built right into the product. You just install an extension. Redgate is hands down our #1 partner when it comes to SQL, and they obviously have several different extensions in here as well. So whatever you need, first thing I would do, look in the task box. Chances are it's in there. If it's not in there, I would then go to our marketplace and see if you can install it. If not, then go ahead and roll your own. And even before you roll your own, I would use the PowerShell task or I would use the command task. Chances are you don't even have to write anything fancy. Just call a couple commands on the command line and then you're off into the races, which is fantastic. So again, the marketplace really adds value and lets you know that this is going to grow with you because our partners are in there making fantastic extensions here as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back and look at our release and see if we're chugging along. So it looks like everything worked out pretty good. So if I come back over here to Cambridge in the in the Azure one, and I click on refresh here, as long as I don't have any caching issues, Cambridge should change to London Reactor. So you've just seen me with just a couple of minutes deploy to 2 different clouds using the exact same pipeline tools, but it gets even better than this. So if I were to go back now to my release pipeline and click on this one here, this is where the demo really got cool to me because none of the stuff before it really impressed me. Yeah, whatever. It's a deployment to a VM. I don't care where the VM lives. It's a deployment to a VM. I'm not impressed with that. ServiceNow integration, that was pretty cool, right? Because we have so many customers who use ServiceNow who now have to do this manual handshake or email synchronization to get things out of ServiceNow into the actual production environment. Now we've completely taken that away from you. Do what you need to do in one. It'll talk to the other. Everything moves seamlessly. Now, when Gopi went ahead and started showing me some of the other cool stuff here. So for example, if I wanted to come back and I want to look at just this section here, what you're going to see is how everything starts to integrate together with each other. I can't touch on this, can I? No, okay. So what you're going to notice here is that I had some tasks actually running down here at an automatic trigger, and down at the bottom is where you're going to start to see the integration that I was talking about. So here what I want to do is look at our particular Actually, I want to do up here first. I'm going to go to our commits here. So these commits here are the commits that I made to the repository to trigger this particular build. And you're going to start to see the commit ID. This, again, is being the hash coming from GitHub Enterprise. And you can see the comments that I have in there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open this in another browser so you can see what this does. So this is a deep link now into another product that lets me see exactly what happened inside of GHE. I don't have to then go over there, remember the hash, try to search for the commit. I simply click on a link, and this commit comes up, and I can see all of the changes that I made in that particular piece of code as if I were in the exact same product, which I really, really like. So what else can I deep link into? I also have my work items here as well. So if I come over here and I click on this item here, and I'll open this in another window as well, I am now deep linking into Jira as well. Right? This is no longer, again, we used to be able to do stuff like this, but you'd have to have several browsers open, and you'd have to take the number from here, search it on this other number to find that particular item. The link wasn't really a link. It was just annotations of that particular item that you'd then have to go cross-reference manually. But now we're able to give you the same traceability that we would give you if you used all of the product, even if you only used one piece of the product across these other systems. And then if I wanted to, I could go back here, go back to the summary where I was about to begin, come down here to my Jenkins build. If I click on this, this is actually going to take me right back into Jenkins as well. So now we've given you a complete round trip. We give you complete traceability if you use all of us or if you only use a single piece of us. A couple years ago, I was asked for this, and I laid in on the customer on how ridiculous it was that you would ask us to give you all this amazing traceability when you don't want to use anything but one piece of our stuff, right? And now here it is. I have to go eat crow and tell them, oh yeah, by the way, that thing you asked for a couple years ago that I was so mad at you about, yeah, here it is. Right? We actually did it, even though I never thought we would actually get to this point. And this just shows you how amazing this is going to be. And that's what I wanted to be able to show you is that the integration points that we've produced, the service endpoints, the service hooks, the web hooks, the REST API is what's made this stuff possible to where no matter what collection of tools that you want to use, you're actually able to stitch them together effortlessly with Azure Pipeline. So again, that is one of my favorite demos. It's short and sweet, but it really shows the potential of what's possible, even with the investments that you've already made today. So again, we are basically, if you need me, Twitter is the #1 way to get a hold of me. People ask for my email. I'm never going to read it. You can ask my manager. I never read any of his either, right? It's just like, don't email me. Just Twitter, I love Twitter because you got to get to the freaking point already. You know, I hate the fact that they doubled the size of Twitter messages. I hate that, right? Because now they can kind of BS me for a little bit. Have you ever got an email where they're like, the first 5 paragraphs is why you should read the rest of my email, right? My customer's so important. He's number 1, blah, blah, blah. This is so great. And by that time, I've already deleted your message, right? So get to the point already. I love Twitter for that. You got to ask me the question. I give you the answer, and we're done. So please use Twitter if you ever need to talk to me. And I think we're done with this, and we can go ahead and jump into the panel. Offer. No, thank you.